right? So the last little part here, I believe, well, step 3 of 4 for challenge group the groupers. They want us to wrap the paragraphs in a single div and to give the div a class of info. So what we've done here, actually got to move this because that moves the H1. So I'm going to Control X and then Control V over here, and my div has a class of info, and I do my close tag of div down here. So that's going to do just the paragraphs, and then I can move on to my next step. So let's do that, and then it tells us last step, use a class selector, write a CSS rule to style your info class, give it a cool looking background color. So that's where I have to go up here into my style section for the CSS. So I'm going to do the class and do a background color. So we will do info and squiggly bracket and let's say background color. Yeah, background color colon, and let's make it yellow. And do our closed squiggly bracket. And so, oh, it's giving me a little error message here, so let's figure out what we need to do with that. Okay, so one character actually makes a huge difference. So what it's saying is that we are using classes, not IDs, and when you're doing classes, it's not the hashtag, it's actually the period, just like we did for the sentences. So we're going to take that hashtag out, put the period in, and now our paragraphs are yellow. So I'm going to finish that challenge, and I'm going to do my spin-off for the challenge group the groupers, and as always we can put our name here and last initial if need be. I'm going to save that, it's going to load, I'm going to share, triple click, and Control C to copy, and I'm going to open up Google Classroom. Yep, it's already open into my student account, so I'll go here to the assignment. There's challenge group the groupers. I'm going to add that in there. Control V to paste, and my first one is finished. And then now we will continue with challenge number 2.
When we use divs, it's often because we want to divide our page into different boxes, resize those boxes, and move them around. It takes a good eye for design to decide exactly how to lay out a page so it looks good, but right now, I'm going to do more of making a page look good and just show you how to change stuff up. Let's resize the official info div. By default, a div takes up 100% of the available width. That's why you see the gray box going across the whole page. But maybe I only want it to take up 300 pics. Well, I'll add another property to the CSS rule up here, width:300 pics. That worked, but let's do something more interesting. Let's use percentage width and say that the div will always take up 70% of the available width. Now, the text is constrained to that smaller box, and the div has gotten taller. If we really want to, we can also constrain the height of the box with the height property. Okay, something funny happened. The gray box resized to 180 pixels, but the text is overflowing outside of that gray box. Why did that happen? That is because of a property we call overflow. The default value for overflow is visible, which means that the element resizes, but the content flows outside of it, which looks a bit silly. What other options do we have for overflow? Well, we could try hidden. That cuts the content off, trimming it at the border. That's not what we want though, because then our viewers won't be able to read all of our amazing official info. We could also try auto, which tells the browser to add scroll bars if the content overflows. Now I can scroll around inside the box to see the text. If we want, we can be even more specific and specify different overflow properties for each direction. For example, if we wanted to overflow with scroll bars in the Y direction, up and down, we'll just overflow Y auto. But then if we want to trim it in the X direction, we can say overflow X hidden. Okay, Be careful anytime you're using overflow because scroll bars can get really annoying for the user, especially scroll bars within scroll bars. Avoid those if you can. Now going back to width height, we can actually use width and height for all sorts of elements, like our images. Now that you know CSS, you can use the width height CSS properties instead of the width height attributes. Let's make this cat image a bit bigger by giving it an ID, cute cat, deleting the attribute, and going up to our style rule. And let's say cute cat, and width 120 pixels. Just like before with attributes, it's best to only specify the width or the height and let the browser figure out the best value for the other dimension. Otherwise, we'll have a squashed kitty. Well, okay, that sounds kind of awesome, so let's just try that for a second. Height, 40 pixels, squashed kitty, yay! Okay, I got that urge out. I'll be a responsible web developer and delete it now. The more knowledge you have, the more responsibility you need to take on. Just because you can add scroll bars to everything and squash all the kitties, it doesn't mean that you should. Because you're usually making websites for other people to use, and what you think is hilarious might be what they find super hard to use. But if you make a few funny things here on Khan Academy, I won't mind.
Okay, so for our next challenge, we're going to play with the width, height, and the overflow that Pamela just taught us about. And so now our first directions on this Ocean website page they've given us is there's an image and a few paragraphs inside a div tag, and in this first step we're going to style the div that has the class of info so that it takes up 70% of the width and 200 pixels tall. So we go here in our style section because this is CSS, and the class means period, and here's the info. They already have the class for us, so they've done a background color, and so now we're just going to add commands, and we're going to do the height and the width as they discussed. So I've already copied it myself. I'm going to paste it in, and what we've done is done the width 70%, height 200 pixels just like they said here, and it's all within the squiggly brackets of the class of info that was created down here in the div. So they created the class within the div right here. So that's step 1. Moving on to step 2. Now it says make it so the div cuts off the overflow text and presents a scroll bar instead. So let's figure out that command. So in Pamela's video, she talked about overflow X and Y direction and how you could use auto or hidden or showing. And so in this case, what we want is for this text right here to actually have a scroll bar and to affect the width as an auto. So if I were to put in the code from our video before, we're going to go overflow Y is auto, which gives us our scroll bar inside the page, and then hidden, which will complete that step. So far in the class of info, which is in the div for paragraphs, we've done a width and a height, and we've done an overflow for the text going all the way down for both paragraphs. Moving on to the last step, it says in the last step we're going to write a CSS rule for the pick class that resizes the image to take up the same width as the text. Okay, so in order to do the CSS rule for the pick class, we're going to go find that class. It's here. It's the image source, so this big image here, which is way too big for the page right now because of what we did with the text. So in our style section, which is CSS, and it's still a class, it says, so we're still talking about a period and not a hashtag, it's not an ID, we are going to do the following. So it's .pick, and then your squiggly bracket, and we're going to match the width, it says, with the text. And so since we made the text 70%, we're going to match that and put width for 70% on the picture. So now the picture and the text are the same size magically. Let's take a look at that again. So if I take this out, then our picture is just way bigger than our text. And if we go back in and paste that in, we've got it matched up and we're good to go. We're going to finish that challenge. We're going to spin it off. And as always, put our name, last initial if necessary, and get our share, triple click, Control C to copy, going back to the assignment, which is We're here, right? Good. I'm going to add it, Control V to paste, add that link, and all of a sudden, in a matter of 15 to 20 minutes, I have my intermediate coding in CSS Part 2 finished with both challenges, group the groupers, and the overflowing ocean. So turn that in, and my teacher, Mr. Cheney, will be quite pleased and will grade that with an A, of course. Now next is the next 2 challenges in this intermediate CSS course. See you back in class.